What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Performance Talking. You know we got none other than Bryson with us now. Y'all been asking and asking because y'all always asking because Bryson brings that ether when it comes to the tech talk. Bryson, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing quite well. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing good, man. Got you on here, man. And people been long awaiting. Every time you leave, they waiting again. And you leave and they waiting again. It's like I do a few more videos. When's Bryson coming back? Because you give great technical analysis, and plus you have a nostalgia kind of talk about the past and then comparing it to the present. So man, you do an awesome job with that. So of course it's very attractive and very wanted by people. So I applaud you on that.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Man, no problem. So let's get into what's going on with Ferrari. Let's have some Ferrari talk. All right, we got Charles and Imola. Now we have Charles now in the French GP. Seemed like to me Charles was pushing unneededly. Now, initially he said something about the throttle, and we know before then in the previous race they did have a throttle issue and it showed in telemetry. In this race, what do you think it was, or what do you know it was? Because I've heard a few different things, but I figure you can clear that up.
No, we have had the advantage now to actually go back and look at the telemetry from that particular lap. There really wasn't anything untoward going on with the throttle. Actually, Jolyon Palmer did a really good analysis of this for F1 officially, where he shows the telemetry traces, not only the speed and the throttle and the brake, but also the steering angle as well. There wasn't anything particularly crazy about the throttle. He did brake at about the same point, but he wasn't initially braking quite as hard. He didn't lose quite as much speed in the initial 2 seconds or half a second or whatever it was of the braking event. But on top of that, he was entering a little bit faster than he was on previous laps, and he was also a little bit further offline on that particular lap than he was. And again, these are a matter of inches in terms of the line difference between that lap and the lap before. But at the speed that he was going and the circumstances that it was, and I think he just got the rear tire on that sort of white line. And there's just there's a big grip difference, depending on where you are on the track, not only because of the actual surface, but because of like marbles and rubber that's sort of offline. And it was just a little bit too far. And look, I don't want to see Charles go through what he went through. That was one of the worst things anyone can have. But what I will say is that there's a very cool thing where as he was sliding across the different painted colors of the runoff, you could actually see the smoke change color.
Right.
So it was actually like green, and then it was blue, then it was white for a second, where there was like the Aramco text, and then it was red, as he got into the wall. But no, I mean, I think he was just pushing a little bit too hard. There's no indication that I've seen on my end that there was a mechanical issue. As far as him not being able to find throttle, that was actually him trying to get into reverse. So he could actually reverse out of it. That was after the crash. And honestly, I think he actually could have gone on. The damage to his nose wasn't really that bad. But he just wasn't able to get the car in reverse, and that was kind of the end of his day.
So you think had he got it in reverse, that he would have been able to get it back to pit and get back in the race? Of course, nowhere near at that point in time to get back into the same points position that he had.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been very difficult, but if there was another safety car or VSC, which in fact there was that can close up the gaps a lot, and then he has the pace to pass slower cars. So it always pays off to keep racing if you can.
Right. So, it seems like to me Ferrari is doing an awesome job at fumbling this championship contention. Like what is going on with Ferrari? Like even then we hear them try to box Sainz as he's in midst of a battle with Perez coming around his corner. Like Ferrari is the glamorous team of Formula One. At least it's presented that way, and at least many others take it that way. Is Ferrari actually living up to these standards, or is Ferrari actually doing things that they previously done in the past, but many people may not be aware of it?
Yeah, I think as far as Ferrari goes, the reason why there's so much pressure on them is because of their performance in the past, is because they've been so successful. It's not just like we're singling them out. I mean, they hold themselves to a very high standard as they should. Regarding Sainz's issue, there is a thing as a delay, as a timing delay between when the normal world feed gets audio versus when it's actually said. But I did go back and look at his onboards to actually see when that audio was actually sort of done. And even there's still a slight delay there. But the reason why he was saying not now is because he was starting to be engaged in that fight with Sergio Perez. Right. It was very clear at that moment that he was actually in the middle of a fight. And to be honest, this question, it arises, well, they want to pit him because there's a strong assumption that they're going to reach the cliff on those tires, and he's not going to have any pace to speak of. And then he'll have to have time to laps to actually make up the places in the other cars.
Right.
The reality of the situation is there was one other driver that had a similar situation, similarly aged tires in a similar compound, and it was Pierre Gasly. And he didn't really experience the cliff at all. He went all the way towards the end of the race. And I think towards the end, he was about to be fighting with Stroll and Vettel for that last point. So I think at a bare minimum, given where he was, you could at least take a shot. Like, worst case scenario, if he stayed out, he would be fifth anyway. If you pit him, he's guaranteed to be fifth. Right. So I think I personally would have kept him out, even if you thought that it would limit his chances or his tires were going to go off. I think that the way that the race was unfolding, you essentially have to choose between probably being fifth and guaranteeing being fifth. And I think, the probably part of it is the thing that actually matters. As far as our strategies and things go, yes, there have been quite a few things that have been, the types of occurrences which would raise questions. I know that Red Bull always has a very aggressive strategy. It's not always right, but it's always very aggressive. And that can kind of prompt the other teams into doing things they wouldn't normally do. So Ferrari and Mercedes, to an extent, have been in a reactionary phase to that. And the question is, what is a reaction? Is it a good reaction? Is it a bad reaction? Hopefully they can learn from this and move forward.
Okay, so going in, because you brought up Red Bull and their performance, and they are aggressive. They're an aggressive team. They like aggressive drivers, I believe, at least one of them to be aggressive. There's like a big thing going out here, and I've got this question, let alone just today, probably like 5 times. Do we think that Red Bull was testing their new revision of floor on Perez in this race, given his pace? Do you think that's a possibility, or what do you think about that?
So there's a couple of things. First of all, I can't say I have any inside information to explicitly say if they do have that or not. Even if I did, I wouldn't be at liberty to say it. Anyway. I couldn't tell you anyway. But to be honest, that's not an unreasonable thing to do if you're a Red Bull, right? If you know that there are changes happening in the future, you want to best position yourself to minimize the impact that they have. You want to be able to do some kind of testing beforehand to figure out how bad could it potentially be, and in effect, make some other changes to your car to sort of mitigate how bad it would actually be. So it's not a completely implausible thing to do. There could be some questions raised as to performance-wise, where would you see that benefit? Would you see it in high-speed corners? Would you see it in top speed and that kind of a thing? And I haven't really looked at that data enough to really be able to say that. What I can say is that Paul Ricard is kind of a front limited circuit. Like when you're running out of grip at the end of the race, it's mostly because you're running out of front grip. You're understeering wide. In fact, understeering wide is what got Leclerc in trouble. We always think of Sergio Perez as this incredible tire whisperer, which he is. He's fantastically good at preserving tires, but it's actually mostly because of his throttle application. He's actually very, very good at preserving rear tires. And that is a very, important and valuable skill for any team, but it's not going to help you out as much if you're front limited, right? If the front tires are actually what's limiting you, then that's actually going to, not going to help as much when you have the high rear grip. One thing I would say, because people kept asking, why is it that Perez can't get past Hamilton? Like Perez and Verstappen had, such a speed advantage, a top speed advantage. Why can't they get past them? And I think part of the reason was because they were having such difficulties with the slower corners and the exits of the slow corners in particular, that they lost so much ground that by the time they actually initiated the DRS, they were just too far back to actually initiate the pass. And as I said before, this is something that's come up a few times. It came up in Spain as well, when people were asking why couldn't Verstappen get past Russell. A car being faster than another car is an abstract concept, right? The question is, where are you faster? Are you faster only on the straights? Are you faster in sector 1? Are you faster in sector 3? And in Spain, the Mercedes was just a faster car in sector 1, or it was at least as fast as in sector 1.
Gotcha.
So it's understandable that it would be difficult to pass, even if overall the Red Bull was faster than Mercedes at that race. So It's a multifaceted question. As far as the Flexi Floor stuff, I'm not going to say anything that's not concrete. I don't have any specific information that they definitely were doing
he's
that.
Not here for.
All I will say is that it's a reasonable thing to do if you're trying to figure out what kind of delta you would get from running a SPA specification floor. And as I said, you can use that data to inform your decisions going forward so that the actual delta may not even be as big as that in the future.
Got you. So with the Flexi Floor situation, people feel like these technical directives that are coming into play at the Hungarian GP, it definitely, I know there was a big fluster when people were like, okay, they changed the deadline. Why are they changing the deadline? And we had a story come out where, okay, some teams are running over as much as, 6 or 4 more than what the allowed is. I think it was millimeters are what the allowed was. Now they're changing it to the Hungarian GP. Now that we have this other implementation of guidelines that could possibly come in with involving the diffuser, involving the floor. Are these things, people just seem to think these things are being benefited for Mercedes. People seem to think they're being benefited for Red Bull. I tend to think that the FIA are trying to find out where and what they can implement to be impartial, but what definitely needs to be done. What's your take on that?
I mean, as far as this question of the changes or the requirements that the cars have to have, it's not actually for Hungary, it's for Spa. They're going to make the changes for this season. I think what people need to realize is the rules that the FIA need to enforce are only as good as the test that you can use to enforce them.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a rule that says you can't have this particular part of the car flex beyond this certain amount of millimeters, and you put the car on the test that the FIA sets up and it doesn't flex more than that, then you can kind of say, well, you didn't really break any rule, really. I mean, the FIA is trying to emphasize a rule, but its ability to enforce it is only as good as a test. So if you figure out a way to design your floor in a way that passes a test but doesn't do something else, it's actually, the burden is actually on the FIA to make the test harder, frankly. Make the test harder and make it better. And in fact, that's actually what we're seeing happening with regard to the skid blocks I mentioned previously. We have the entire question of the plank flexing, which is one question, but a separate question is what's happening with the skid blocks. And some teams, we certainly saw one of them, and there actually may be a third team that people aren't thinking about that also has this trick, is that their skid block is actually separated into 2 parts, a part that's towards the rear of it and a part that's towards the front. And they're allowed to be sort of floating relative to each other. And there's sort of a clever way which you can mount that such that you actually get that in contact with the ground, they would normally wear. The part that you actually want to measure can be cleverly moved out of the way so that it doesn't wear. So it actually allows you to run the car lower than you would otherwise. But as far as what the FIA is doing and what the ostensible reasons for why they're doing it, at the end of the day, all I personally care about is vertical acceleration. Right? Because vertical acceleration is what injures drivers. It's what causes problems. That is the safety basis for all of this. The question is, what do you actually have to do to accomplish this? Now, as far as the flexible plank question, the argument is basically saying that they want to have a level playing field so that when they actually calculate this AOM, aerodynamic oscillation metric, they're doing it on a fair basis, which I can kind of understand. I think a better way to think about that is if you have a flexible bodywork rule that you're trying to enforce, teams are just not abiding by it. So just figure out a way to enforce that better. But in terms of making changes for 2023, which is actually what you mentioned about the floor edge and the diffuser and things being changed, I really have a split mind about that because what it essentially is doing is it's making changes to the car that in general would tend to increase your margin away from porpoising. And it does that by eroding performance. It's kind of like McLaren early on in the season had almost no porpoising whatsoever. And really the reason why is because they didn't have enough downforce. Right. And as they've been starting to build downforce, and as they've been starting to actually add performance to the car, they're starting to actually see it more. And so that's kind of the strategy they're using to do that. The problem that I have is there are teams that are able to have their car at the high performance level and avoid porpoising. I mean, even Mercedes now has learned enough about how to manipulate the flow underneath the floor They've actually had some suspension modifications as well to be able to allow them to run the car at a low ride height and not have the porpoising or the bottoming issue. Okay. So the FIA's argument as to why they still want to make these changes, even though teams seem to be doing okay right now, is because they're going to keep adding performance to the car. The car's just going to get faster and faster. There's going to be more and more downforce. Who's to say that sometime in the future, they build cars that are so fast and have so much downforce that they can't avoid the porpoising issue at all? They're saying even if you raise the ride height to the maximum that you can with the suspension travel that you have, you're still going to get it, which is actually, what Mercedes' problem was early on in the season.
Right.
I think what I would rather have is teams demonstrate that they can't meet that target. I think they probably can meet the target if they need to.
Okay.
I think what I would actually want the FIA to do, which is essentially what they started to do, was to actually set some sort of vertical acceleration limit or something that's sort of proportional to that as sort of a hard line that teams can sort of shoot for and say, hey, listen, I'm not saying what's going to happen to you exactly if you don't hit this target, but it's bad, right? Don't force Lewis Hamilton to experience like 10G, for 60 laps around Baku, right? That's all I want. All I want is for the teams to not be in a situation where they feel like they have to sacrifice driver health and safety for performance. I think the pure introduction of this AOM metric is enough to do that. They don't think so. They think they want to push it further. I really am not convinced that that's really the right way to go, but we'll see how it goes. There is some rumblings that some teams aren't happy with what the FIA is doing and they may protest it. So it may not even come into effect. We'll have to see.
Okay. So let's talk about the least upgraded team on the grid, Haas, at least to my knowledge. And if you know of a different team, then you could bring them up. Haas, to my knowledge, has been one of the teams to do the fewest. I think Williams has been one of the teams at one point in time to bring the most upgrades at one GP. I think the count might have been 12 to 15 upgrades at one GP. McLaren, to my knowledge, probably comes in 7 this last race. I think they might have bought it in like 7 to 9 or 7 to 8. Mm-hmm. Haas, they've been messing around with this front end plate for the last month or so with this little nuance.
The dive plane. Yeah.
So Gunther seems to say that the pace is good. Therefore, that is why they haven't bought any upgrades to this point in time. Is it because the pace is good or the pay ain't good as far as the financial ability of Haas being able to upgrade this many amount of times as other teams? And even if they do bring these upgrades, what do you foresee it doing for Haas? Because to me, Haas has done pretty well this season in comparison to past seasons. So I've been pretty pleased with Haas. But what do you say? What do you think?
We have this sort of naive perception about what upgrades actually are. Right. In fact, using the language upgrade presupposes that they're effective, right?
Right.
As far as Mother Nature is concerned, all these are changes. Correct. They're just changes. It's just a different geometry than you had before. Whether or not it's actually an improvement has to do with correlation. You've done your wind tunnel work. You've done your CFD work. They tell you this should be faster, but at the end of the day, you have to run it on an actual track with actual wind conditions and actual drivers, and it may not actually be faster in reality. So sometimes teams find, and I think Gunther is of this same mindset. Sometimes teams find that it's more important to have very, very impactful upgrades than a lot of them, number one. And number two, there's a lot of time to be found just in maximizing the performance of your car every weekend. Because if you build a car that has a very high theoretical performance, but it's very peaky, it's not very high, a little bit off that perfect design window, that's not as good. That's not as good as something that's a little bit more robust. So I think that they've been focusing more on maximizing the setup of their car and making sure that they actually can get 10/10ths out of it, every weekend, than actually giving the upgrades that we're describing before as far as body work and stuff. But the point that you said before is also true. The money isn't infinite, right? I mean, they don't have an infinite amount of money to pay for this stuff. And we've had some very, very big crashes. I mean, if you think back to Mick Schumacher's crash in Jeddah, that was a completely new chassis, basically. I mean, there was a lot of things that needed to be changed on that car to be able to go moving forward. So the more crashes you have, the more money that takes out of your development budget. And they are just making the decision that it's much better to have a few upgrades that are very effective than anything else. Now, That being said,
Okay.
we do have, I believe, direct confirmation at this point that Haas is bringing like the upgrade this weekend. Okay, no, it is the upgrade because they haven't really had a huge upgrade at any other point, as we mentioned previously. But also, it's going to be big, and I'm told that it will be visible. Like you will be able to look at it immediately and say, okay, that's the new one, and that's the old one.
That's the old one. Okay.
And there's some rumblings that it may be more like the Ferrari design. And as I've kind of mentioned before, we haven't seen many teams truly try to replicate the Ferrari bathtub sort of design. We've seen some teams use the same similar style inlet. We've seen some teams, do some other, tricks around it. We haven't.
You don't think Alpine kind of?
I think Alpine kind of has, but it doesn't have the same sort of rolling curvature that the Ferrari does, and it uses the louvers in the side pod very differently than Ferrari does. No matter what we have, there's nothing as extreme as the Ferrari was. Even if other ones are close to it, there's nothing as quite as extreme.
Are you about to think that the white Ferrari is about to unveil itself?
I think we're about to see something closer to a white Ferrari than we've seen in the past. I don't think it's going to be quite the same level as like the RP20 from Racing Point, pink Mercedes. It's literally like reverse engineered with like photogrammetry software to be the same. I don't think it's going to be quite like that, but I do think it will be a really big upgrade. Okay. And given their pace that they've already had, I do think they actually could be very competitive going forward. So I'm curious to see it.
Okay. So that gets me into this. Because you just said, there's going to be a big visual difference with the Haas, and that will be interesting, of course, fascinating, because when it comes out, everybody's going to be looking for it to be better. And that goes back to what you're saying, like upgrades just kind of trick you into thinking like the word up, you're thinking like, oh, it's going to be the best, but technically you got to put on track and it may not be the best. So is it not an upgrade or is it change? Williams recently had this same dynamic, and it was very interesting to me to see two different concepts, spec cars on the track, but in the same garage. Mm-hmm. So had Williams abandoned the slim down side pod version, but yet still Latifi running it and Albon running the new revision. Do you think that you saw anything in there that told you either car was better than the other, aside from Latifi doing kind of what he does sometimes? Do you think that anything might have been different there?
Yeah, I think so. And let's not forget, it's not only Williams that did this. It was also McLaren, even as recently as France. In free practice, they started off with one car testing out the new side pods. I think it was Daniel. And then eventually decided, this is actually working. And the thing is, this is just good engineering practice. You always want to be able to do back-to-back tests, not only so that you can prove that the new version actually is better than the old version, but you can quantify how much better it is, right? These cars are very... They're very new in the design sense, and it's not entirely clear how good the correlation is. So it is always good to do back-to-back tests if you can do it. Notably, Aston Martin did not do that when they brought their big side pod upgrade to Barcelona, I think it was. Immediately, both cars had that new package on it, and it took them a few races to figure out like how to actually like get the most out of it. But no, in terms of what I've seen, I think the shift that I've seen as far as Williams goes is that they originally designed their concept around like a very, very low ground clearance, very, very stiff ride that had like amazing sort of performance for the floor, but they were having the same porpoising and bottoming problems as other teams. I think what they went with the new concept is, I think it was FX is the name of their technical director. I forget why he's called that, but his name is FX. But essentially, he was saying they wanted a setup that was less ride height sensitive. They want something that was sort of easier to get downforce out of over a wider range of ride heights. Okay. Now, one of the immediate consequences of that is that it actually could be a little bit more twitchy. I think Albon had some issues going into Copse a couple of times at the British Grand Prix earlier on, but those can be dialed out with setup things. So broadly speaking, I do think it's an improvement. It's not just a change to the side pod. It was a change to the floor edge, change to the engine cover. There's tweaks to the front wing and stuff. But generally speaking, I think it is an improvement. And the fact that they've committed to giving Latifi those same upgrades now is an indication that internally they also think it's an improvement. So
okay. All right. So how do you feel now about Mercedes at this point in the season, Lewis has had back-to-back podiums. Recently, just had a double podium.
He said four podiums in a row.
Four,
Actually,
back-to-back, four
Yeah.
back-to-back podiums. Yeah, 4 of them, and now they have their double podium. What do you think about Mercedes' progress? Now, I'm already like, I'm waiting for 2023. I just honestly, realistically, don't foresee them fighting for the championship this season, but I do foresee realistically them coming in second, possibly coming in second in constructors, depending on how things unfold. How do you feel about Mercedes and their progress thus far?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there's momentum building at Mercedes. There's no question that they have knowledge of today that they didn't have at the start of the season. They're able to get much more out of their package than they were previously. I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is how much performance can a concept give you out of the box, and how much development potential is there in the future, right? So the question is, how much performance can you get today? And then is there actually like a limit to how much you can sort of push a concept, or can you really get a loads of performance out of it? And I think when you have to talk about the current car design and what things might look like in 2023, I think the thing to consider is that not only is it the case that the car itself will be, maybe it will be kind of similar going forward mechanically,
Okay,
but the regulations are stable. So the information that you learn this year can apply directly to next year. Now, does that mean that they're going to have exactly the same zero side pod concept next year? I don't know, maybe not. But what they have proven is that it's not decidedly worse in the sense that they're fighting in the midfield or in the back of the midfield, and there's no potential in the concept. There clearly is. The question is, how much more do they think is there, and do they think they can get something better with a different concept? And I think one of the things that was pointed out early on in the season, it's still true today, is that the mechanical gymnastics that they had to do to be able to actually package the radiators and intercoolers and the ERS coolers and stuff to have the zero pod side pod concept. There's so much real estate there that they have available. If they actually wanted to expand their side pods, do a wider side pod concept, like pretty much every other team on the grid, they could do that without even changing the mechanical internals that much.
Right.
So I don't think they're going to do that this season because, as you said, they're not really fighting for the championship. And, they actually could fight for a second if Ferrari keeps having the same kind of struggles that they have.
Right.
But in terms of what the car's going to do, I think they're going to make the W13 as fast as they can, but they're not going to make new developments to it if they feel that they've learned something to pursue a different direction. So the question basically is, what do they know today versus what did they know yesterday? And that's the only thing you can use to make a decision going forward.
Do you think at this point it's safe to say the Mercedes is already focusing on 2023 developments?
No, I mean they're already building the car. I mean they've from as soon as the season started, they were building the new car. And I know for a fact that there are things that are in the development pipeline for this current car that are still going to be coming in later races. In fact, there's going to be more upgrades for Hungary as well, aero upgrades. I think their focus is definitely going to sort of shift to it. But as I said before, anything you learn from this season will help you next season. So I think there's still things that they are still figuring out that have application for next season. I don't really know what they think the best concept is today. I do know that they're not going to just completely give up on this car and not do anything to it. I think if they're not going to bring more updates to it, there'll be setup related things. And again, these are all things that go in your utility belt, right? You can imagine your Batman. Okay, you have this utility belt of knowledge and little tidbits that you can use to actually make your car faster going forward. So all of it's good, and they're definitely building momentum.
Okay. So we got some popping news. I mean, it's news that's been developing, but now it's starting to seem like things are getting closer, things are getting finalized. Porsche 50% of Red Bull Technologies, I would like to say, because I think people read the article, and you can even correct me if I'm a bit wrong, but the way I took it is it wasn't so much 50% of the actual Formula One team than it was a certain sector of Red Bull, but there is going to be access to the Formula One team. How do you feel that this may change the landscape going forward for not only Red Bull, but the grid?
I don't see any reason why this would not be a very strong partnership.
Okay.
The Honda Red Bull pairing has been stronger than people thought it possibly could be. But to be fair, Red Bull did do their homework on that partnership because they had Honda partnering with, I guess there was Toro also at that time, and getting engine data from them to make sure that they actually could produce a good engine before committing to it themselves for the following year. And I do think that there are some gray areas regarding what is actually a new manufacturer in terms of engine performance and power unit design, right. And what kind of special allocations that they should get under the title of being a new manufacturer. I think that those things need to be clarified and handled with measured reason. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case, but hopefully it will be.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if Porsche has any interest in AlphaTauri as a team or buying them out or anything. I don't think they do. But it will be a strong partnership, I expect. So if Red Bull is dangerous now as a competitor, and they are. I think it would only make them more dangerous going forward.
And this is Porsche is not the only one that's part of this deal. Is it not the other part of the Volkswagen family? Is it Audi or is it Volkswagen itself? I think it's Audi, correct?
Yeah, so Audi is coming in
as a team. One coming in as an engine supplier. Like, where is this?
Yeah, I've never really understood how that entire conglomerate works, but my understanding is that Porsche is not interested in coming in as a team itself. It's coming in as a power unit supplier in a partnership with Red Bull, kind of like a 50% type of deal. Okay. Audi really wants to have its own team, seemingly. Now, no teams getting into Formula One really want to build an entire team from the ground up. Right. Just the inertia involved in getting that whole thing running is just tremendous. So we'll see how it actually works with other teams in the grid. I'm hearing Alfa Romeo is actually a reasonable target for Audi, given that some other ones are kind of not interested in changing their ownership. Wow. It's a good thing, generally speaking, to have more manufacturers represented on the grid. But I'll always push for more physical teams rather than new ownership if I can. It means more space for young drivers to drive in the sport. Right. It means more jobs for engineers and mechanics and technicians and all these other people. The sport can only benefit from adding more teams, especially if it adds more representation. Right. Geographical representation is one of the things that the sport doesn't really quite have right now as the way it really should be. So I would actually support, an American team. I would support even like a Brazilian team or like a Chinese team or something. Right. All these things are possible. The question is, are the conditions right to actually make it happen? I think they could be.
So what is going on with the Andretti thing? I'm not like, why is this being so piped down, but yet everything else seems like it can have some type of progress, but then Andretti's like, it's like a stonewall block. Cause I've gotten that question as well too. Like, how is it that there's constant conversation, constant dialogue, constant news about the progression of Porsche and Audi coming into the sport, but yet Andretti seems to be getting blocked in a way where I think if anybody should be able to, I don't understand why that couldn't be the case. Why is that? Like, do you have any knowledge of that, or maybe your own personal opinion on why that's being stalemated?
In my experience, I have yet to find a good reason why it's being stalemated. There's all this talk about you don't want to have a team that might leave in a couple of years or whatever. Manufacturers leave on a whim constantly from Formula One. That's a terrible argument. They leave constantly. And if you were ever trying to find an organization that actually has the wherewithal to sort of stick in the sport, it's one that's dedicated to racing. Right. I mean, Williams as a team, there is, Williams Advanced Engineering that does, cool drivetrain stuff and some electrical systems, but primarily Williams just makes race cars. No one's really wondering, is Williams going to leave tomorrow? I mean, they have new ownership and everything's kind of, trending in the right direction. But, Honda came and Honda left, and, Toyota was here for a minute and then they left. I mean, I just don't think it's a good argument. And in terms of viability, I think the team definitely has a very good argument to be made. But also, there's this question of we don't want more teams because it'll make our slice of the pie smaller. And my counter argument has always been maybe percentage-wise, your slice of the pie will be smaller. But if the pie itself grows significantly, you still get more pie, right? It's not a complicated argument. I think I need to hear better reasons why that entry has been denied, and then I've heard because again, I'm not trying to allege European bias and everything else, but at some point you have to say, well, what is the reason? What is the reason why you're denying this? And there is a lack of good reasons that I've heard, and I just need to hear more.
Okay. How do you feel about Vettel? I said I didn't think that. I've said it more than a few times. I didn't think that Vettel was going to be around in the next 2 years or a year. I just don't think. I don't think Aston has performed or given him what he may need at this point in his career to enjoy his time out there, to feel at least competitive. How do you feel Vettel's gone in the next 2 seasons? Maybe even less?
That depends on him. I mean, here's the uncomfortable truth about all these kind of conversations, because it comes up with Alonso as well. There's always this, well, you're not doing good enough to justify me being here. I'm a 4-time champion. I'm a 2-time champion. You have to do better as a team. That's a very different mindset to, we're in a difficult position right now. Let's work together to improve the car and find a way to drag ourselves up the grid. Okay. Right? It's a very different mindset to how drivers view themselves in relation to a particular team. I feel like, I'm not saying Aston Martin has the potential to be a front-running team in the next year and a half or whatever it is, but I feel like there is the potential there to work on a project and go through the difficult years of not being competitive at a given time and sort of get the payoff of that in the future for actually being competitive and knowing that you put the work in to move the team up the grid. Now, that's an incredible amount of work that's required to do that. And depending on the team you're with, it could be more work than in others. But I feel like this idea that the team isn't doing good enough for me and it's not worth my time, so I'm just going to leave. I feel like it's a simplified version of what's actually going on. Okay. And it also hinges on what the driver is actually looking for. What are they interested in? Are they interested in just driving Formula One cars in general because they just love doing it? Or is it an essential part of their existence in the sport to actually be in a top running team? I mean, it's a challenging thing. I mean, I think that at some point certain drivers value their experience in the team and just the joy of driving more so than driving for the top team. I look at the way that Valtteri is sort of taken to Alfa Romeo, made that team his own. He's just having a phenomenal time right now. There's no pressure on him to perform at the front of the grid. And he's I'm sure he wants that at some point in the future, but he doesn't need it right now. He's enjoying that team very much so, and they're enjoying him. So I think it's just a question of what the individual drivers are, what are they looking for, or they need going forward. Do I think he's going to retire? Actually, no, I don't. Okay. I think that there is enough mutual desire, both from him and from the team, to go forward at least another year or so. Okay. But we'll see what they ultimately decide to do.
Okay. And, you said it's interesting that you said Valtteri is just enjoying his time. I don't think Zhou was enjoying this season, bro. Like Zhou's had a very rough, to me, rookie season. I mean, with the Ferrari failures, he just had this, thank God it wasn't a fatal wreck. I just don't, how do you feel Zhou may be enjoying his season at Alfa Romeo? Do you think that he's brought in, or do you think it's possible like he's looking to go somewhere else? Or do you think because of his standpoint, especially with the China backing and coming in there, he might just sit there? How do you feel about maybe his season going forward with Alfa Romeo?
I think his season's actually going reasonably well. I think most of the things
he's on track and he can stay on track.
But I actually think that almost all the things that are negative about his time in F1 so far have been linked directly to his mechanical issues. Right. He's had like 4 times the mechanical issues as Valtteri has. That's certainly going to ruin your day. And of course, he did come together with the Haas in the last race and had some front wing and plate damage. And having a clean race is always going to be an important thing cost wise, but also just getting seat time. But no, I'm actually pretty happy with him. No, I don't think that there's any reason to move him right now. He definitely does want to get some more races, under his belt. As I said before, the mechanical issues have really been unlucky, I would say. Right. But on the other side, he's been very lucky with regard to that crash at Silverstone, which was not really his fault at all. No. In fact, it would be very difficult to lay fault at anyone's feet specifically for that incident. It just was a kind of a
The
high speed
racing
thing, and there were a few cars involved. But no, I'm actually pretty happy with Joe. I hope he's. I'm not sure if he's going for a big result this season, but I am interested to see how the rest of it goes.
Okay, and how do you feel about the Piastri loan, the PP Piastri? He's going out there. You know, I call him the PP loan. They loaning Piastri out to Williams. Supposedly, I don't know if it's fully going to happen, but if it does happen, what do you think about that concept going on for Alpine loaning Piastri out to Williams? Possibly. How do you feel about it? Because I'm not going to say what I feel about it. I want to know how you feel about that happening.
So Latifi's time in Formula One needs to be over. I think he's done. He's had a reasonably long run in the team, and I just don't think that he's really competitive enough to justify that seat going forward, especially with the drivers rolling around. Again, this question wouldn't be so hard pressed if we had more teams, right? If we had more teams and more places to put people, this wouldn't be as much of an issue. But that being said, Oscar Piastri won the Formula 2 championship on his first go. And in fact, he did so in a very difficult field of drivers, right? Not every driver can say that. He's definitely good enough to be in Formula 1. He deserves a Formula 1 seat. So I would probably say I'm okay with him going to Williams and driving for them because, as you remember, Guan Yu Zhou, when he did his test runs for F1, they weren't at Alfa Romeo, they were at Alpine. Right, but where is he actually driving now? He's driving at Alfa Romeo. So just because you test for the team doesn't mean you actually have to drive for them. But let's not forget that, you know, there's a current Formula 2 season going on right now. You know, Felipe Drugovich is losing the championship, but also there's a young, American driver in that series right now, Logan Sargent, who's doing extremely well. And in fact, if he, did install the car in his pit stop in the feature race in France, he probably would have won that too. So the thing is, as Joska Pita would say, it's a great problem to have a number of people looking for your seat. But Piastri is the one who is proven, and I think definitely should get the seat. But if for some reason he didn't, I think Logan Sargent is a good option too.
Okay. And Lewis Hamilton, the big, definitely a big question. More people want him to quit just so he doesn't continue to be great and need these. I mean, it's crazy, bro. The men on comments say, oh, he needs to quit. Then we had somebody literally coming out, oh, he needs to retire. But I mean, Alonso's got the longest standing career right now in Formula One. Nobody's hollering for that. Like, what do you think? What do you think going forward Lewis is doing? I don't see him quitting. I think he's very well fond of Mercedes and the development of Mercedes. And also I think he has a fondness for Russell and developing him or sharing his knowledge. And I just don't see him going anywhere. And to me, I mean, I saw him catch that water bottle. That shit was pretty fast. And I think he still got his reflexes. How do you feel about Lewis going forward as far as with his career or forecast?
I mean, the thing is, Father Time catches up to all of us, whether you want it or not. But the truth is there's no sign of it, right? There's no sign of it catching up to Lewis yet. He is absolutely just as competitive as he's ever been. I think people expose themselves to a degree when they say that Lewis should retire. Lewis doesn't win a race in like 10 races. People say he should retire. Meanwhile, other people on the grid haven't won a race in nearly 10 years. 10 years.
I know he was going to do it.
And they're saying that they're in a resurgence. They're in the best form of their life. Right. I mean, the double standard there is patent, right? It's quite clear. So no, there's no reason why Lewis couldn't continue. And it does. I mean, look, what was done to him in Abu Dhabi should never be done to anyone under any circumstances. And as we mentioned on this show previously, there's nothing that they could do in the future that could actually make up for what they did. Right? Even if they wanted to return the championship to him, which they don't want to, that doesn't take away the moment of the championship of rightfully earning it on the day in front of your family and your friends and your fans. That's taken away from him, and it can never be given back, regardless of what they want to do. So there is some sense that he has unfinished business, not to make up for what was done, but just because he's competitive enough to win more championships than he can. So I think that there's this talk that Abu Dhabi could have stopped Lewis Hamilton sort of in his tracks. It actually may have galvanized him. It may have pushed him to say, you know what? I'm actually going to put all of his records completely out of reach. We always assumed that if Lewis won the 8th title, he would just say, that's it. There's no other argument. So. I'll just hang up. But he may feel the need to push it to like 10, I mean, could you imagine?
Ooh,
Could you
that's
imagine a
a
driver? I'm not saying that he'll be able to do that. There's a car factor involved and everything else, but
right.
if he is willing and competitive to do it, why not drive until your heart is content? I mean, certainly he doesn't need to stop racing in order to focus on fashion things or music or whatever. He's already doing that anyway.
Yeah,
he's already doing that anyway.
Fashion so streak at every GP.
He doesn't have to actually stop to actually do those things. So I think he could definitely keep going. And I think the question is, this is precisely getting back to the point I said previously.
Okay.
Do you want to go through the pain and the challenge and the turmoil of bringing a team up from really a lost state and making them competitive again? I mean, let's not forget, Lewis has essentially broken his back for this team, right? He runs experimental setups, he runs sensors, doing all these things, not for what's going to happen today, but for tomorrow. What does a team know now that it didn't know before? Precisely because of those sacrifices. And if everything they've done this year puts him in a very good position for next year, why not? Why not go for it? I mean, Lewis's name is synonymous with greatness at this point. Seemingly anytime he does something, it breaks a record. I mean, I was going back to look at this. If he wins in Hungary, he would actually set the all-time record for any driver of the most Grand Prix won by the same driver. And it would be 9 times. He's won 8 times in Hungary and 8 times in Silverstone. If he wins in Hungary at any point in the future, it will be a new all-time record for any driver in any circuit. So he's still got it.
Yeah, because he's tied with somebody there, isn't he?
Schumacher. Yeah, Schumacher won the French. Well, the thing is, it's actually even more complicated than that because Schumacher won the French Grand Prix 8 times. But I'm pretty sure the circuit of the French Grand Prix has actually changed over those years he was racing there. Correct. So the actual record would be the most number of wins at the same circuit. Correct. And he already kind of owns that, but it would be even more if he got to the 9th one. So I'm definitely looking forward to this journey from Lewis. I think we're not appreciative enough of how lucky we are to see drivers of extreme talent actually be able to race in the sport long enough to actually see these kind of records being broken. Because the safety in the sport historically has just not been good enough to even allow them to actually race this long. So I'm thankful we're able to actually see Lewis race for as long as he has. And if he wants to go to 400 GP, more power to him.
More power to him. 400, that's a number. That's a number. So, okay, final question going into this. Aston Martin, to me, has been disappointing this season. They've changed his car. We've had the pink Mercedes. We've had Tracing Point. We had recently the green Red Bull.
It's Green Bull. Green Bull.
Green Bull. Like with all of this, how do you grade their performance right now? And with that grade, what do you attribute that grade to?
I mean, I'm sure Lawrence Stroll has a 5-year plan and his expectation as to how to get to the front. But they need to work on their correlation with the aero. If you remember the, green turtle that we saw at the beginning of the season, was actually a pretty cool concept, right?
I liked it.
And the thing is, this is why I try to keep explaining to people. It's not like people don't know what they're talking about. Every team has some of the best engineers in the world, and they know their stuff, okay?
Right.
The issue is the subject matter is extremely complicated, and your very plausible, very justifiable explanation for why a concept should work just might not be real, right? Okay. The subject is complicated enough for verified experts to have this being the direction they want to go, and it seems like it's great, but it's just not, right? Okay. So I think they need to sort of improve on some of the core aspects of their design process, or sort of the workflow, how the geometries are actually being generated, how they're being tested and done in safety. And that's the thing, is that whenever you have a new car, the correlation fundamentally changes, because the things that your CFD code has to be good at fundamentally change. The floors on these cars are so much more important than they were in the past. If you have a CFD code that's great at calculating like induced drag or loads on a wing, that's very helpful. But if it didn't happen to be great at calculating loads on a floor, that didn't really hurt you as much in the past as it does now. So maybe there's areas of development that they can look at to improve their workflow.
Okay. All right, Bryson, I give you the floor, man. And I know you got some new developments could be happening. If you want to let these people know, let them know. I'm always going to put Bryson's Twitter link, so y'all don't have to ask me. You could just click the button in the description. I put it there. So just click it and go. But Bryson, what do you got on the iron, man? If anything's cooking, let these people know, because they're going to ask.
There is a podcast coming. I can't confirm who it's with and when it will start, but things are in motion sort of behind the scenes. It'll be a tech-focused podcast. It'll be, a lot of times we'll enjoy coming onto the show and doing a tech-focused sort of subset on someone else's show to kind of shed some light on a particular development. This particular podcast is going to be entirely about that. And so it'll be an opportunity to ask questions and explain things in a lot more detail than I have in other situations. So that is in the works. It should start sometime in August. I will let people know when it starts.
Okay. And I will definitely be here to let you all know about that. As you know, I support the brother as far as what he's doing and where he's going. Are you going to be at any future GPs taking, famous pictures? Because people don't know who you are now. So they're going to be like doing this. You're going to have to learn how to do the selfie thing now. You know that, right? Like,
I do.
Get ready. Yeah. So are you going to be going to any future GPs coming up?
I will be in Austin. Yeah. And I will be there starting on Thursday, and I will be there until Monday. So.
Woo, bro, you gonna be riding it out. All right. Well, hey, that brings us to another awesome episode with Bryson here at Performance Talk. You know where to come. Subscribe, like, and if you dislike, just give me some feedback. Let me know what you dislike. If there's something I could do about it, I will, but I'm always going to be myself. So I want to tell everybody, be safe. Let's build together, and peace. Thanks for tuning in and watching another video here at Wolfpack Performance. Check out some of my other content on Formula One issues, our topics, and our DIY products on how to customize your vehicle. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.